Hello everyone, we're now in our final video on the organizational structure of the argument presentation, and we're talking about the body, and the first part is of course the support. So a little bit of what I expect to see. Regardless of whether you're agreeing with Smith or disagreeing with her, you should be giving 3 specific reasons to frame things. So I'll show you what this looks like in the student model, but the 2 things that I'm recommending that you keep in mind are that first of all, you need research support. So you need to make sure when you're choosing the reasons for your response that they are concepts that are researchable. And again, we'll talk more about this in class. It could be that they're tied to current culture. It could be that they're tied to some observations you've made just about Smith and her writing. It's up to you how you want to support your agreement or disagreement, but you do need to be tying in source insight. And then number 2, within those supports, the goal isn't just to look at these 3 reasons in their own isolation. It's to always tie them back and remind us of how they're in response to Smith. So you should be reminding us of the original essay that you're analyzing within that section. And then the second thing that I'm asking you to do in the body is to create an extended example, which we'll look at in a moment from the model. But basically what I'm asking for is a pop cultural model that expands on your response. And the note I have here is it can come sooner if you like. This is just where I think kind of in a standard analysis it would belong, which would be I'm setting up context on a theorist's idea. I am providing some support or opposition to explain my response to that theorist's idea, and then I'm looking at an example that is giving us a more complex understanding of my response, right? And so it's something that logically makes sense to house here, but if you want to give some sprinklings of a setup of what exactly that example is going to be, you can definitely bring it in a little bit sooner. So I'm not going to dictate exactly where it should go, but in the standard format, I'm saying right here. So let's look at the example from the website here. So for the support, again, keeping in mind the thesis, right? The idea that Smith argues that comedy has the power to unite people, and that this is something that the presenter, being me in this case, agrees with, right? So support 1, the first reason why I agree. Again, if I disagree, then support 1 would mean the first reason why I disagree, right? But in this case, the first reason why I agree, it's because of the universality despite social class that is provided by comedy, right? And so what I'm doing here is I'm providing the support of 2 different sources that I utilized. And these are sources that would be included in the bibliography, right, the annotated bibliography that I would have submitted for the paper or the presentation. So the first one is a comedian and anthropologist, and here I don't have quotes, I'm just breaking down some key points that I would articulate. And then I have a humor and culture specialist. So what I'm doing is saying here are the qualifications of my sources, and here are some brief points that they provide. I would elaborate on that, and then as you can see here, I'm tying in an essay connection. So this allows me to say, here's my research for this first support point, and here's how it ties back to exactly what Smith is saying, right? So I'm basically able to break down her idea based on my source. In this case, with the goal of agreeing with her, I could do the same thing on the other end and say, and this is why I disagree with her. Support 2, catharsis. Again, I'm basically doing the same thing here. Instead of just setting up the theorists, I've given specific quotes from them. And again, there's a tie back to Smith, right? It's saying that in the story, the tie is within the concept of Smith and her brother. So still doing the same thing, saying here's the research I have for the second support, and here's how it ties back to Smith and her story. Same thing with the third one, setting up that specific point or reason for my agreement in this case, and then breaking it down, tying it back to my sources. So as you can see, I kind of played around with the sources a little bit. Here I have a paraphrasing of the sources. In the previous slide, I had direct quotes. and in the one before that it was more just breaking down some of the source's key points. So it's totally up to you exactly how you want to integrate them, but you need to make sure that you are being very direct in saying these are my specific sources and here's how they tie in with my analysis. And then of course the same thing here, tying the source content and my analysis back into Smith, and her theorizing within her analysis, right? So again, this is an example of maintaining that balance between here's my research on why I believe my response to Smith, and here is how it ties back to her story. So those are the things you should be working on for the support in general. And then my model of looking at a specific example, which we'll go over this in class together, but basically the example that I chose in this case having to do with comedy and universality is Key and Peele. So it's just a breakdown of exactly why I think that this is a strong example. I connect it to Smith and I provide my own reasoning. And then let's see them in action. This is just my note to self that I would include a couple of pieces, right? Keep in mind that your presentation is allowed to be between 10 and 15 minutes, so you definitely will have time to share some video clips and images and things like that. This is the only place where I kind of set that up here, but it's up to you. It definitely doesn't have to be that you wait until the end of your essay if you want something like this or your presentation. You can include clips from the very beginning or throughout. It's your choice, but I do like to see this kind of multimedia dimension, and I would assume that maybe I would show just pieces of 1 or 2 clips from them that wouldn't total more than a minute or 2 within the presentation. So now that we've talked through the components that should be included within the body, just some final notes to think about. In regard to the conclusion, I said it should be brief and personal, and of course, you should be thinking about the bigger picture. I should have just kept open that other video. So for the final slide here, I basically just have my own thought. You could end with a Zadie Smith quote if you want. It's really up to you, but this is just my final commentary that laughter bonds and heals humanity, and Smith gets it. And I would explain a little bit of this, going back to the personal dimension of why I, as a writer, find that comedy is challenging, but I understand why it is that she respects it so much, and I agree with her. So it will be brief. The main component is, of course, those body paragraph kind of breakdown sections, but after I've gone through that complex example, I need to remind us again by broadening it back to Smith's point. So these are the main components that I'm expecting to see. We'll of course be going through this in class over the next few days, but in summary, you're doing a format just like you would for an essay, and I realize I said essay a couple more times that I should have here, but you're doing an intro and a thesis, you're doing the body with supports and the extended example, and then your conclusion should be brief and personal with, of course, a tie to the bigger picture you're looking at. So we are done with our video components for the session. I hope you found them useful, and we will be elaborating on them in class tomorrow. Thank you.